hello to all, and a merry goodbye to the year of the plague. We celebrated saying goodbye to the plague year with our favourite Christmas tradition, the Christmas Prince movies.
I love these films.
I love these movies. So I'm a big fan of romance novels. I like the worse they are, the better, and like the Christmas Prince movies hit that trash mark that I require in my media. So we're gonna talk through plots, the world building of the universe of the Christmas Prince movies, and how they take place in an alternate world where presumably the Cold War never happened.
Oh, it gets weird.
Okay, so the first Christmas Prince movie, I wrote so many goddamn notes, which opens with off-brand Christmas music.
It's not quite rocking around the Christmas tree. It's got the same
It's the same tune.
It's the same tune. It's the same underlying track played in a slightly different key, but the lyrics are just ever so slightly different.
It's our favourite time of year.
It's like when if you ever worked in retail or been in a shop just at Christmas, when they can't afford the license to get the actual Christmas song,
yeah.
so they play the like wedding band cover version.
You UK peeps, you'll know, if you go to Superdrug never pay for licenses, so they always have the worst cover versions of songs, except like this isn't even a cover version, because I can't imagine how much it costs to get the licensing rights to do a cover of Rocking Around the Christmas Tree, which this movie's made by Netflix, who
have money.
They make Oscar-nominated movies, and they couldn't afford the licensing rights for Rocking Around the Christmas Tree. Wouldn't it cost more to completely re-record it in a different key, completely rewrite the lyrics, and then hire someone to do it?
I guess it depends on how much the derivative license costs. Like, if the difference between the derivative license and the actual song license is far too much, then it probably would be cheaper to just record a cover of it.
It's just like so much effort. This is like the first 2 seconds of the movie, and it's like, it's our favourite time of year, and you're like, that's how you know it's a Bizarro universe. It's like the Bernstein Bears thing.
They did it on purpose. I mean, they probably didn't, but they definitely did. It's
like the split point of this universe is when Rocking Around the Christmas Tree was written, and this whole other universe was created where it's not Rocking Around the Christmas Tree. The song is It's Our Favourite Time of Year.
Well, I mean, Christmas Prince 3 kind of says no to that, but let's do it movie by movie.
Okay, so you see some sweeping shots of, I presume, New York.
I don't think they ever actually say.
I think because her dad is New York.
Dad's got a proper New York accent, like a 70s New York accent.
So I presume it's New York. So we have Rose Mciver, who's from iZombie, which I've been told is really good. So and that she works at not BuzzFeed. Not
BuzzFeed. Well, I forget what it's called exactly, but it's basically BuzzFeed.
I think it's Beat Now Beat. It's like a millennial startup company with an ambiguous name.
Reminds me of I don't think you ever did, but did you watch Wonder Chosen? It was one of those like early 2000s MTV skit shows.
I didn't have money for MTV.
Yeah, fair enough. But Wonder Chosen had a scene or a running gag, which was a journalism company run entirely by children, and it was called Kids on the Beat. And the theme song was Kids on the Beat, Kids on the Beat, Beat Kids, Beat Kids.
Okay. And I guess whoever wrote this came out the year that Meghan Markle and Prince Harry got engaged. So, and I think Amber, her name's Amber.
Amber, yes.
I remember. And it's very Meghan Markle inspired, but I think as well, it's not just Meghan Markle inspired. I think she has elements of Princess Diana and elements of Princess Grace.
It's kind of just like nebulous royalty meets non-royalty, and they marry or they get
So she's got like a blog and social media stuff, which Meghan Markle had before she married Harry, and then she's got the ingenue who's sort of young and naive that Diana had, and then also she's American and like coming to a small country. Small.
We'll get to that.
coming to a small country, which Princess Grace had when she married Prince Rainier of Monaco. So it's like she's like a jumble of all those princesses together, and like I've seen it a lot in romance novels. There's so many that are like American socialite, normal American lady meets prince of small principality, and they get married, and like drama.
So what you're saying is that Christmas Prince is
very derivative. Yes.
It's just a white remake of Princess and the Frog.
Right. Amber has 2 token friends at this company, and she works doing copy editing for the other journalists, but she's not a journalist herself yet until the company needs someone to go and cover the coronation of Prince Richard of Aldovia, who's a Playboy prince, and they're like, we've got no one else, it has to be you! The bird loves it.
I'm going to put Nikki in the kitchen.
And obviously there's no one else at the company that can do this at last minute, so Amber has to be sent to Aldovia to do this. Aldovia, which is an ambiguously sized country with 1 airport. So I assumed it was like a micronation.
I assumed it'd be sort of maybe like Luxembourg-ish, like kind of like small but noticeable.
Yeah, like Monaco. You kind of get the feeling that it's meant to be a Monaco place.
A Monaco place, yeah.
But unlike the other micronations, which were all in Italy, Spain and France, this one is sort of like far ambiguous to the east of Europe.
Like the Baltic region, kind of.
Possibly. Well, you can't tell, because then when she arrives, all the signage is in English and everyone speaks English, but
and they've all got British accents.
They all have British accents. Creating an entire language or like dialect or written alphabet would have been, just slightly too much effort, but I would have appreciated it.
I mean, if Tolkien can do it, it didn't take him that long.
They speak a generic Slavic language.
Yeah. I was trying to think of some Slavic words and I just couldn't.
Do you know any Serbian words?
I mean, I know a bit of Serbian, but I wouldn't recommend translating it if I say it.
Oh no, you only know the bad words.
I only know the bad words, yeah.
Okay, so all the journalists arrive at the one Aldovian airport, and they all get shunted off to the palace, and then they're like, well, no press conference because Prince Richard can't be found.
We just don't know where he is, which is a real bad system. Like, he's the heir to the throne. We should probably have kept a better eye on him.
But Amber wants to be a real journalist, so she
breaks in.
She sneaks into the palace.
So the palace isn't that big. Like, no. It's. I mean, it is a real place. They filmed it in the real royal palace in Romania. It's not very big.
It's the current home of the Romanian royal family, who are not technically the royal family of Romania because they don't have any actual powers like a constitutional monarchy, but that's where they live, that's their base.
European history when it comes to monarchies is quite complicated.
It's complicated. And it's a nice, but it definitely feels like a summer palace. You don't want to be there all year round. Like,
it's not Windsor Palace, it's a Balmoral or I don't know.
Yeah, it's like when I don't know, it's hard to judge the size of palaces because Buckingham Palace, you think that's big and that's really tiny. And then you go to like Versailles and Louvre and they're huge. So you're like, oh, okay, Aldovia is kind of like Andorra.
Yeah.
It's a tiny Christmas nation. Everything here runs on the basis of Christmas.
Their main export is Christmas cheer.
Christmas. Everything's Christmas. And so she sneaks into the palace. They do no ID checks. There's no security at all. So this is a very safe version of Europe. Clearly no monarchs have ever been hurt in this version of Europe.
This is where it becomes apparent, or at least interesting, to think about the idea of a split history. Because, like, the Soviet Union was not very kind to European monarchs in Eastern Europe. And if they've got no security and they don't do any ID on her when they found her, and like you said, the implication that no one's tried to hurt a monarch before, has this monarchy been in place and like for a long, long time? And if it has, does that mean the Soviet Union took over or not? Because if it didn't, like what happened with the Cold War? Because it's meant to be sort of around that area that the Soviets all took over. So like, what happened there?
Yes, we just don't think about it.
We just don't think about it.
Because the butler meets Amber and is like, hey,
you must be.
You're the new tutor for the princess, aren't you? And Amber's like, yep, that's me.
There's no other Americans here. You must be the American tutor that we hired to teach our little princess.
I'm not going to check your ID or a passport. Just move on in. Meet our princess, Emily, who is, over the 3 movies, the single best character.
Yeah. She's got the most personality. She's got so much personality that it makes up for the fact that Prince Richard has none.
No personality. Yeah, when their parents had those children, one child ends up with all the personality and one ends up with none, which is a spoiler to his identity.
I mean, Princess Emily is a lot younger than Prince Richard, so I like to imagine that Prince Richard was such a boring disappointment of a child that they had to have another one.
So Emily is disabled. I think they say specifically spina bifida, so she can't... Well, she does go to school, but they also have a tutor for her in the past, and Amber's her tutor, and like you see where this is going, because now she's friends with Emily, and oh, now look, here's Prince Richard, and they do lots of whimsical activities with each other.
Like archery and sledding? Yeah.
Yeah, they do sledding.
They do sledding. I think that's it.
No,
there's a wolf.
There's a wolf. They do sledding, and then it's like an excuse where they're like, "Oh, I fell down on top of you.
Oh, I fell over again.
Oh, I fell." Like, and you're like, "Oh, okay, I see how this story is going." Except there's a villain in this story,
Simon,
Count Simon, and Lady Sophia, because Lady Sophia is Prince Richard's ex-girlfriend and is like very pissed that she's not going to be queen. So she forms a plan with the evil Count Simon, who is
Prince Richard's cousin.
So presumably the previous king had a brother or sister
who we never meet and is never spoken about.
Well, if Simon has a title, that means that his father is dead.
Convenient.
And Simon is like, I would like to be king. He's so slimy.
He's into it. He knows he's evil.
Yeah,
he's
I'm
leaning
evil.
in.
I'm into it. I want to be king. Sophia's like, hey, do you want to be evil? And Simon's like,
sure,
I'm in.
Why not? Got nothing better to do in this micronation.
Especially because it makes it clear that Simon is trained for royalty. He's got like a degree in economics and he knows like all the talky bits and he's like committed, but they're like, but Richard is a playboy and doesn't take his role seriously because
he's rough and ready.
Doesn't want to be king, and like they have a public event at an orphanage because Aldovia, for some reason, has
orphanages.
But it's not it's a private orphanage. It's not run by the state because they have to do charity drives to fund it. So I'm like, oh, okay, Aldovia apparently has no social care network or anything, and I'm like, okay, cool, weird, but they do a charity drive for the orphanage because it's Christmas and no one's bought the orphans presents.
I thought you were going to stop at no one's bought the orphans, which is also true.
And it's bad because Richard spends his time with the children, having fun with the children. He's like, my duty is to the children, not to the country, mother, the Queen Helena.
I mean, the one thing, growing up in England, the one thing I've learned about the royalty is that, they don't care about children. They don't care about people who are poor. So it's actually, he's like a radical prince.
Yeah, and he's like, and everyone's like, oh, can he even have the responsibility of kingship? And Simon's like, but what about me as king? But, Amber is on Richard's side because they've got this thing going on. Like, he goes riding into the woods moodily and she follows after him, and then wolves attack.
A single wolf. Which, wolves don't really attack people unless they're cornered or in danger. And also, why is it just the one wolf? They are pack animals.
Unless it's rabid, that would be why it was on its own.
They don't get that across clearly in the film.
Maybe it's a rabid wolf. But anyway, it seems very much like the bit in Beauty and the Beast where Belle gets cornered by the wolves and the Beast has to come in and rescue her. But anyway, they go to a cabin and have a long talk about Richard's feelings because
it's a romance novel.
And he's like, I don't feel like I'm living up to my father's promise. And then Amber is a snoop because she's a journalist.
Well, she says she's a journalist.
She's a journalist. and she finds the secret adoption papers because Richard isn't part of the family. That orphanage is so important to the royal family because that's where he came from. They bought him for Christmas one year.
That was his Christmas present. Oh yeah, because his dad's King, whatever his name was.
King Deadman.
King Deadman. He also really liked orphans. Not enough to nationalise the
orphanage.
Not enough to set up a welfare system for underprivileged children, or to just adopt all of them because he's the king and has all the money. But he likes them enough to just take one.
Yeah, so they adopted Richard and concealed it. I don't know how they managed to hide the adoption secret.
There doesn't seem to be as big of a media blitz around the Aldovian royal family.
They seem to be maybe slightly more private. Also, I just had a thought. There's a really big... The orphanage is really big and it's got a lot of children. What in Aldovia keeps killing all the parents of these children?
Maybe it's that rabid wolf.
It's that one rabid wolf.
He's a known problem.
I'm like, there's so many orphans.
Maybe it's Simon.
It's like, I mean, some countries in Central and Eastern Europe still do have orphanages, but orphanages aren't really a thing anymore. You have children's homes for some children, obviously being in the part of the foster system and things, but you don't really need an orphanage because statistically very few people are going to be orphans when they're children. So what causes all these orphans? Why is Aldovia full? Is their main export dead parents?
Maybe. It's that and Christmas.
Well, anyway, Amber finds out that Richard's adopted, and because she's a journalist, the first thing she does is tell a lot of people that he's adopted and what she should do. And I'm like, the minute you tell another person, there is no way that you can contain that story.
You save that. You save... Like, I'm not a journalist. I can barely read and write. But what I would do is I would collect all the information and release it as one big story after he's been coronated.
Or the fact that you've got this romance with him, just like... Tell him.
Well, I wasn't even thinking about that.
Well, it's a romance movie, so they've got to have a conflict. Couple gets drawn together, then there's an event that forces them apart, and then they get back together. That's the formula, and it works. It's a good formula. But here, the thing that drives them apart is that Amber immediately tells a bunch of people that he's adopted, then
doesn't tell him.
Tell him, but then leaves his adoption papers out on the side in the room that she's staying in the royal palace, and then Simon and Sophia are like, aha!
This is why she's not been assigned any actual journalist duties yet. Because of shit like this. This adoption paper fundamentally changes the royal family system of this sovereign nation, and she just leaves it on the coffee table.
She leaves it on the coffee table and she's like, this is alright. I'm going to a ball with Richard because he's about to be crowned, and we're going to have a romantic moment where I wear a dress and we get to dance in the tiniest grand hall of any palace I've ever seen. And it's a great moment. And then they're like, hey, he's going to be crowned tomorrow. Here's our inauguration of him as the heir. And because our coronation rules are kind of written like marriage laws, we're going to be like, whosoever has an objection to this coronation, let himself know now or forever be at peace, like you would have at a wedding. And then obviously Simon and Sophia come forward and they're like, here's the adoption papers. He is not the heir because he ain't born from the royal family, and because for some reason we still have Salic law in place, women can't inherit, unlike every other monarchy left in Europe who all have, I think, equal inheritance rights. Like, Simon's like, he can't inherit, Emily can't, I'm, me, Simon, king, me! And then Richard storms out. He's furious with Amber. He's like, get out of here. How could you do this to me?
I mean, it is kind of her fault.
Yeah, it is entirely her fault.
Yeah.
Somehow. But she remembers that her and Richard read a poem in the shack. A poem that leads to an acorn Christmas ornament that the dead king made, and as she
It's a fucking ugly ornament as well. It's literally just a giant acorn. That's not Christmassy.
And as she opens it up, she finds inside a royal decree saying that Richard will legally be the next heir to the throne, even though he's adopted. So
it's not how law works.
Well, that's the thing. A royal decree superimposes over law when you live in an absolute monarchy and the king has a final say over the law. Which is a problem, because as I've said, they have a prime minister, which means this is a constitutional monarchy.
They have to have elections, I assume, for their prime minister.
Mm-hmm.
So how... One of them's a figurehead. Either the prime minister or the monarch would be a figurehead. And it very much... Because the royal decree is able to go through and fix the problem at the movie, the prime minister's a figurehead. Is this like a monarchy dictatorship?
Well, absolute monarchy, I assume. If the king has absolute say over the law...
Even after he's dead?
Even after he's dead, because he signed and sealed the law, but then was like, I guess it was meant to be a Christmas present.
Here's a Christmas present.
Here's my Christmas present, you're now legally my heir. Ignore all that adoption stuff, even though I could have written this into law years ago, I just chose not to.
How young was Richard when he was adopted that he can't remember that he was adopted?
I think he was a baby.
That makes sense.
So I presume that they were having fertility problems, adopted the baby, and then years later were able to have Emily.
Yeah, no, they did. There was fertility problems because they said like, "Oh, I wasn't able to have children. What about Emily? She's a
Christmas miracle."
I don't think they say Christmas miracle, but
it's
the
implied.
implication, yeah.
So I guess this is an absolute monarchy, which I'm like, okay, sure. I don't. Are there absolute monarchies left in the planet? I
mean, oh no. I was going to say, I guess technically Japan, but even then, no, because they have a president who actually runs the country as opposed to the emperor.
But I guess Aldovia is the last European nation to have an absolutist monarch. They still follow divine right monarchy government. It's great. I'm sure the people of Aldovia love that. But anyway...
That's probably why they have a prime minister, so they can feel like they're having an impact on the government. Anyway. And then he just sips off with gin and toast.
So Amber has found this. She solved it. Her and Queen Helena, Richard's mum, run to Parliament where Simon's being crowned.
Not in the Grand Hall this time.
And they're like, hey, actually, guess what? Richard is going to be king. And everyone's like, get out of here, evil Simon. And then Simon's just like, but
I want to be king.
Well,
but
technically, he was following the law. Legally,
he was correct. He was
legally,
right.
Richard was not the rightful heir. Simon was. He was only following the law.
And then Lady Sophia storms out. They're immediately getting divorced after, a day of being married?
They got married the day before, and then immediately she's like, peace.
But foreshadowing, because at that point, when she leaves, his concern is no longer with being king. He's immediately following her, trying to fix their relationship.
I guess he's not all evil. But then the coronation happens for Richard in the Parliament, the pointless show Parliament, which is written like a marriage, because they're like, do you promise to be with this country in sickness and in health? And it's like...
You may now kiss the country.
Which is... Anyway, so he's king, so I guess that means that things can't work out. So Amber goes back to New York, is fired by the magazine, even though she both discovered and broke the story about him being adopted and also fixed the problem.
It's kind of weird because, like, all the stuff about the adoption and, like, Simon being evil and trying to overthrow this monarchy is all in the story that she wrote, but they won't publish it because it's a puff piece, because it paints Richard in a okay light. And I'm like, no, you still want to run that. That's still really,
She discovered the evidence and also fixed the problem that she made.
But then it's, you can't fire me, I quit. And she walks out and goes to work at her dad's diner.
Where a bagel and a coffee cost $4.95. And I'm like, what crazy world is this?
That's how much a coffee costs at Starbucks by itself.
Yeah, what crazy world is this, Rudy? How are you still in business and haven't been run out the neighbourhood?
Well...
Gentrification, man!
Well, when it gets to time to discuss the alternate timeline, there's the possibility that...
Socialist America!
Or just, maybe inflation's better.
Maybe inflation.
Maybe inflation's a bit better.
Okay, so Amber now has to work at her dad's diner, and it's New Year's Eve, and everyone's celebrating New Year's in the diner.
For some reason, there's 12 people there all celebrating.
But as midnight comes, knock, it's Richard! Well,
he throws a snowball at the window, which is just rude. He could have knocked, but instead he, attempted property damage.
He's the king of an absolutist monarchy. I think
so he's just declared war.
He can do whatever he wants. But anyway, he gives her the fuggliest ring I've ever seen.
Oh, it's disgustingly bad.
Oh, it's real bad. But I mean, I think it's so big because it's meant to me. Not only is it just a hugely obnoxious piece of costume jewellery, but because it's a big blue stone, that's Diana's engagement ring. That looks nothing like Diana's engagement ring. But
they just weren't being subtle.
It's a big blue stone. And I'm like, if you really wanted to do it, you can get costume replicas of that ring real easy.
Well, they spent all that money on the rock around the Christmas tree cover.
It's our favourite time of year! Anyway, the next year, obviously Harry and Meghan got married in a ceremony that did make me cry. I cried like a baby throughout the whole thing. I hate the monarchy, but I'm like, it's a marriage and they're so happy.
And to be fair, Harry's the best one.
Harry's the one that gets to live.
He's the only one that will avoid the guillotine.
Madame la guillotine. But yeah, and I cried because they just looked so happy and she was so beautiful. And also, all the cast of Suits were there and that was real weird.
So it's a year later.
Yeah, so it's a year later, and the theme of the year is clearly the show writers, according to my notes, have really been paying attention because do you remember, well, do you know, obviously because it's still happening on, that the media hated Meghan Markle, so now we're going to start talking about the impacts of the media.
And if you don't think the media hated Meghan Markle, let's remember that Boris Johnson said that she would put exotic blood into the royal family's bloodline, which, ooh, he's Prime Minister now, that's not good.
Well, anyway, Amber faces those problems, but not as much because there's no racism involved. She's white, they can like her. But anyway, so they have this whirlwind year-long romance and they're going to get married at Christmas.
Because of course.
Because of course, it's a Christmas movie. And they've been dating long distance and Amber has been supporting herself through blogging. Blogging is her life. And I'm like, okay, I don't know anyone who makes money purely based on blogging anymore.
Blogging is normally a side gig.
Unless they've been doing it for a really, really long time. But I suppose she is going to be the queen, as she specifies, of a small nation. So it's not a micronation now. Aldovia's been upgraded to small country.
Oh no, they've invaded some surrounding countries. It really is Europe.
So I guess that she's got a Patreon going. People are chipping in for her royal coverage.
Kickstart my queenage.
Blogging is her living. Because she's going to Aldovia for the wedding. She brings new Rudy. Rudy, her father, has been replaced.
Recast.
Feels like a completely different person.
I think I actually prefer him, but maybe that's just because he's in this film more.
I think we haven't mentioned performance at all, because obviously we haven't. But I will say that the actor who plays Rudy and Rose Mciver do have a nice vibe with each other. They do have a really nice chemistry.
I buy that they're dad and daughter.
Yeah, they work really well together, so that's good. So Amber's arriving, and she's facing problems immediately because, wouldn't you know it, becoming a queen is really hard.
Becoming a queen isn't all it's cracked up to be. Record scratch, zoom in. John Hughes, directed by.
And because they're like, hey, you've got to follow royal protocols, and also we're going to dictate to you everything that you can do in your life from now on because you have no private life anymore because you're going to be queen. And Amber's like, shucks!
Gee willikers.
How come everyone's telling me what to do all of a sudden? Why are you trying to control my life? And I'm like, because you're becoming a queen.
You're becoming the queen of what appears to be an absolute monarchy.
She's like, I can't believe people are dictating my choices. And I'm like, yeah, because you're part of a royal family now and they don't live like regular people.
I guess it makes sense in having her be American and that she wouldn't actually fully understand what being a member of the royal family entails.
And yeah, you can see why it's been inspired by the kerfuffle that's been about Meghan Markle, because everyone's like, she doesn't understand protocol, she does blogging, she's breaking all the rules. And I'm like, for Amber, it comes across as really whiny that she's like, why aren't things the same when I'm a queen? They're like, hey, you can't be out in public on your own. Hey, you need a security detail. Hey, you need a PR person. And she's like, oh, shucks, I hate this. And I'm like, you're becoming the queen of a small nation, love.
If you don't like this, you could choose to not be queen. Like, you're not a member of a royal family. You can just go work in your dad's diner and blog. Mm-hmm. You could blog about how you rejected being a queen.
But, blogging is her life.
Blogging is her life. It's the only thing that matters.
And anyway, so they arrive in the country, and Mrs. Averill, who's the lady butler, played by Ursa from Superman 2. So whenever Amber's whining, I'm just like, lady, at any point, that Mrs. Averill could crush you in half.
So are we assuming...
She's Kryptonian!
I was going to say, are we assuming that this is a direct sequel to Superman 2?
Yes. So Amber arrives, and her wedding planning is being taken over by a guy called Sahil.
Who was just the most extra I've ever met.
The most extra. He's very annoying in this movie, but he gets better in the next one.
Because he's in it less.
And so he's been hired to do her wedding, so she has no control of that. And on the other hand, Mrs. Averill, the lady butler, is saying that Amber's public image has to be controlled, and the public perception of her has to be managed, which is a surprise for Amber, who has never worked in media in her life and therefore understands nothing.
She was a journalist.
she was a journalist. She wants support from Richard in this, because obviously he'd be the best person to turn to, only Richard isn't being very supportive right now, because he is an absolute monarch and he's trying to change the economy of Aldovia.
Which is tanking super fast.
Because it's a new economic drive or an economic mission that his father created, which is to get Aldovians to invest more in Aldovia. So it's about building infrastructure, new roads, new hospitals, but like nothing's happening, everything's stalling, and like money's just vanishing, and he can't manage it, he can't control it, even though he's an absolute monarch. So presumably all decisions have to go to him. He is completely clueless, and he is like, I don't know what to do.
He's so busy in this film dealing with the economic strife of Aldovia that he forgets to have a personality.
Yeah, he does. And he's just like, I could look at the budget, but I don't know what to do. And his mum, Queen Helena, is like, well, Lord Leopold oversaw the introduction of the economic plans, and then he mysteriously vanished to Monaco, the tax haven. So I guess we just have to trust that his plans will work. And I go, So you gave him billions and billions of euros, and then he buggered off to Monaco, the tax haven, and you aren't a little bit suspicious.
But then they rehire him. They bring him back to fix the problem that is very obviously his fault.
So they bring him back to fix the problem. Meanwhile, Amber's having to deal with her wedding, which is very overboard and ornate, which I've put, note, riff on Charles and Diana wedding.
I mean, probably.
Because they have these very, very elaborate plans for the chapel, and these very, very elaborate dinner plans, and this really hideous, elaborate dress.
Ugly as fuck.
And for me, that goes, if you're talking about gigantic royal wedding dresses, my mind immediately goes to Princess Diana, because that wedding was very, very big and overblown and out of her control.
Yeah.
They're contrasting, whether intentional or not, that wedding was really so big and exuberant, whereas Amber, who is a much more modern bride, when you look at Prince William and Kate Middleton's wedding, and Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's wedding, which are both very simple.
Kind of reserved.
Yeah,
it's like the bombast that you'd expect.
It's very focused on them. It's very more streamlined, more contemporary. So you get this clash between really old school pomp and circumstance and sort of a more modern, streamlined look. But, you know, Aldovia has a 700-year history that Amber has to live up to. And I was like, only 700 years old? That's another Monaco reference. The Grimaldi family been in charge of Monaco for 700 years.
What was...
Royal knowledge is useful.
I know I asked this the other day, but 700 years ago, what was happening in Europe, like, roughly?
Plague.
So was Aldovia formed as, like, a nation to, like, help combat plague? Like, is the formation of Aldovia a result of the Black Plague?
Well, part of me goes like, oh, did the Holy Roman Empire, like, have collapsed? Except that Aldovia isn't anywhere near the Holy Roman Empire, so that's useless. But it's sort of in the region above where Byzantium would have been, so I guess Byzantium fell early.
When the map is introduced in episode 3, we will address the issue of where is Aldovia.
So, you know, who knows? But then, so Mrs. Avril is like shadowing her constantly. I made a lot of notes about Amber has to be repeatedly reminded of royal protocol, and she just will not get it. The royal protocol thing is a Diana thing as well, because Diana broke lots of royal protocol.
Although I feel like Diana was doing it on purpose.
Yeah. Whereas Amber here is just like, I don't get it!
I don't understand. What do you mean I've got to put clothes on when I go outside?
Like, she's whining to her friends on FaceTime, and her friend's like, we are unemployed.
One of them I think still works at Beat now. But
no, he's a security guard for a ramen company.
Security guard for a ramen company, and the other one's unemployed.
And she has to live with her parents now, and they're like,
fuck off. Stop complaining.
But no, and Amber tries to get Richard's help, but, you know, the king is busy because he's running the country.
Very badly.
Very badly. The king is too busy for me. He runs a country, Amber! I'm reading my notes. There's so much in this movie. And so, anyway, so Richard has to give this speech, this public speech about, like, the economic vision, except it's booed by the populace of Aldovia, who've all come very pre-prepared, like, very neat signs.
And there's, like, what, 50 people?
There's, like, 50 people.
There's, like, no people at all.
And they boo him down. And then guess who's in the crowd? Simon!
He's back, baby!
I smell a redemption arc.
Although he's framed as if he's going to be the bad guy again.
Yeah, like, because he's in the crowd of, like, protesters, it's, like, framed as if he's been egging them on.
But he doesn't have a disguise. He just has a different coat.
There.
So he's just there, like... And it's very clearly Simon.
And so Simon's back, and this drives them, they're like, we've got to bring Lord Leopold, the architect of the economic plan, back. And then Simon bursts in with his redemption arc. Because he's poor now, and he's been humbled, because Sophia took all his money in the divorce. Somehow.
Which, like, despite the fact they were only married for, like, a day, specifically so that he could steal the throne, legally. How did she get all the money?
Yeah, you would have thought they would have gone for an annulment. But I guess Aldovia is actually super conservative and have really strict divorce laws, maybe?
Would it be easier to get an annulment if Aldovia was heavily Catholic? Or would that make it easier for her to take all of his money in a divorce? Or...
Well, I don't know.
Because it's never stated exactly what is the main religion of Aldovia. No. It's clearly some form of Christianity.
But, like, it's very vague Western Christianity.
Like, we don't know if it's Protestant or Catholic or Seventh-day Adventism, like, or Orthodox.
Because it's in a region of the world where there's a lot of Orthodox... The Orthodox Church is the most powerful church. Here's a question. Aldovia is in a region of the world where there's a lot of Muslims. Does Aldovia have a Muslim population?
It's never brought up in the film, so we can only speculate. I have to assume that the reason there's so few people in the Aldovian capital is because they don't let them in if they're not Christian.
Well, then, if Aldovia is in the region where the Ottoman Empire was, if the Ottoman Empire didn't happen in this universe, then there wouldn't be many Muslims in that region. Because a Muslim population exists because those countries were part of the Ottoman Empire.
And that'll all be explored in the third film.
Oh, yeah. But anyway, so after this speech, national strikes break out over the cross of Aldovia, because national general strikes are really good for forcing change. which is bad. Like, Amber's against the strike because Princess Emily's Christmas pageant has been cancelled.
Oh yeah, she's in a school play. And like she has a crush on the boy who's like alongside of her. Also, it's coincidental that she got the lead in the play when she's a princess. And that's the main thing that Emily's upset Amber's upset about, is the fact that she can't do her school play. And it was a tiny auditorium as well. The stage was like, it's like that big.
The parasite rich children can't do their play, and Amber's like, oh, I guess this is a problem now, and not the fact that like native Aldovians are starving and are jobless. Parasite children don't get their play. But I will say that with the play, you do get to learn a bit more of Aldovian world building, because the play is about the origins of Christmas in Aldovia, about the evil ogre Grendel, who is a figure from Beowulf, a female character in Beowulf. She's the mother of the monster. And the evil ogre Grendel steals a princess because he's jealous of her beauty. Then the princess finds a baby in the forest and imbues it with magical powers. And then Grendel, I guess, is overcome by her kindness and then lets the baby free and then kisses her. And he becomes a handsome prince, but the baby becomes Santa Claus, and that's how Santa Claus has his magic.
Now, is the Aldovian explanation for how Christmas happened completely separated from, like, general Western Santa evolution?
Well, it's interesting that they call him Santa Claus, which is a lot of, not Father Christmas or specifically St. Nicholas, because I could see this being an elaborate saint's backstory, because when you read some saints' hagiographies, like, there are some wacky stories for Christian saints, so I could buy that being like an origin for St. Nicholas, but they never refer to St. Nicholas.
I'm thinking about the patron saint of horses. What a dumb thing to be a saint of.
Or a lot of countries in sort of southern and Central Europe, the region that Aldovia is in, have a grandfather Frost who is a Christmas character, but more specifically the person who brings presents is normally St. Nicholas, which is a really specific person. So it could work as an origin of St. Nicholas.
Is it further east you get, the closer to Turkey you get, the more likely it is to be St. Nicholas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not, say, the Catalonian Christmas log.
The Catalonian Christmas log, which just like pumps out presents.
If you look into like your really specific country Christmas traditions, they are very interesting. Which is why it's nice to learn like a really specific bit of folklore for Aldovia, because it does round it out as a country. Although all their Christmas traditions are very American.
Very Western, like British
very
American.
Western.
There's not much like religion involved in the Aldovian Christmas traditions. It's all big tree, lots of present buying, a dumb school play,
cookies, milk, that sort of thing. It's like they even open their presents on Christmas Day, and the further east you get in Europe, the more likely people are to exchange presents on St. Nicholas's Saint Day, which is the 6th of December. They tend to do it a little bit earlier.
Like even when we went to Germany, Christmas Eve was when everything was shut. Christmas Day, everyone goes out. Yeah. Presumably to return the gift they didn't want.
Yeah, and then like Boxing Day is another big present. But it just... But, you know, they've slapped on generic American Christmas, but they are developing a little bit more, which I like. It makes it feel a bit more unique. But anyway... Emily's Christmas play can go on. Amber sorts it so it's at the palace. Parasite children have their play. Ooh. She takes pictures of it and puts it on the blog. And she's like, this is great for the PR. Only Mrs. Averill, like, gut punches her and is like, no, we can't have the royal family be seen to have fun.
Don't they delete her blog without her knowing?
Yeah. And then in the background, she's like, oh, I'm so frustrated. And in the background, Richard is talking to Lord Leopold about the financial problems, and Lord Leopold's like, don't check anything, it's fine. And I'm like,
don't worry about it, forget about it.
That's not suspicious at all.
Turns out it's quite suspicious.
And like, this all comes to a head when they have to do that photograph session. They have to do like the official photograph, and Amber can't wear her necklace. She has to wear this like fuck ugly piece of costume jewellery. And Richard's there just like, just get it over with, just get it over with, get it over with. And like, she does not take this well. Although he could have just said like, no, leave my wife alone. So Amber's going to investigate the financial thing. She's going to fix it.
She's going to do a journalism.
She's going to do a journalism.
Like she hasn't done at all so far in either movies.
So her and her friends who've arrived to celebrate the wedding go to a bar to talk to a guy who got fired. Sorry, we're British. We had to have a tea break. Tea and biscuit break. Anyway, so Amber is on the case with her 2 tokens. And they're going to go... Did I say this bit already? I don't know.
She wrote fishy on a notepad.
She wrote fishy on a notepad. And she's talking to the real people of Aldovia to get the real story. And they're saying, like, hey, Aldovian companies bid on contracts, but then, like, this one big glockenspiel company put in bigger, like, bids and won all the contracts, and then we've all been fired and lost our jobs. And Amber's like, oh, fishy. But then someone recognises her in the bar, and it starts turning into like a big hullabaloo. And then guess who comes to rescue her?
Simon!
Simon's like, I know what I'm doing, I can help, get in my car. And it's it's the put it in H car.
It's a real old car. It looks like a holdover from like the Soviet Union.
Put it in H. And they drive to the palace.
What country is the car from?
It no longer exists. And so they're going to go to the palace and they're going to hack into all the government records to find out who's behind Glockenspiel Limited. And only like things get hairy because Richard's like, what are you doing bar hopping with Simon? This has gone all over the press. And Amber's like, I'm gonna run away and now you have to find me. And Richard's like, I'm sorry that I've been hugely unsupportive this entire movie while trying to rectify a massive economical crash in my country. And Emily is hacking away because she's a master hacker and the best character.
She knows the system I'm in.
Constantly just dragging Simon for filth the whole time.
Oh, it's great. She is
great.
Unrelenting.
And
he deserves it.
But Richard like meets up again with Amber and he's like, it's fine, we can have a simple wedding ceremony. You can keep your blog. Blogging is your life.
The only thing that matters.
And they're going to have a simple ceremony, none of the fancy stuff. And then it is revealed the owner of Glockenspiel is...
It's Leopold.
It's Leopold.
Of course it was Leopold. A, he was only introduced in this movie, so of course it's him. And 2...
He's been living in a tax haven for a year.
He's been living in a tax haven for a year. It's very clearly him.
3, he set up the entire economic system, which is now failing. He was like, I'm going to run with my billions of euros, and then Amber threatens to shoot him with a bow and arrow.
Well, that, but also, why did he come back?
Yeah, why did he come back?
If it's been working for him, why did he come back?
What's the extradition policy from Monaco to Aldovia?
Like, does Monaco do extradition like in general? Because it's a tax haven, so I assume probably not.
Yeah, he could have just stayed there and been like...
But yeah, then the future queen of a country threatens
him. But it's okay. It's an absolute monarchy, so she can do whatever she likes.
Probably could have shot him as well.
Yep. And what's interesting is that they have billions of euros, which means that Aldovia is in the Eurozone. It means they have to be part of the EU. Aldovia, an absolute monarchy, with whatever system that they have,
with privately run orphanages
that kills all those people for the orphanages, and which allows a queen to like almost kill a criminal with a bow and arrow. Also, he's extrajudiciously thrown in a dungeon by Queen Helena.
Yeah, my assumption is at this point that he is a citizen of Monaco, so they've taken a foreign national and thrown him in their own private dungeon.
Also, Queen Helena can't do that because she can't arrest him. She has no judicial powers.
Citizen's arrest.
So, I guess in this universe, there are euros, but maybe not the EU. Or the EU just has really lax human rights guidelines. I mean, like, some people have argued that they do already, but...
Or maybe Aldovia started the EU. Maybe they're one of like the big six.
Part of like the G6.
Maybe.
But maybe human rights laws don't exist in this version of reality.
Maybe the EU is actually evil in this reality.
So yeah, Aldovia is in the Eurozone. We're not. Aldovia, where like kings and queens can make laws without the oversight of Parliament, is in the EU, but we're not. What does that say about us?
It means we need more Christmas exports.
More Christmas exports. But anyway, so the movie ends with Richard and Amber getting married.
And it's fine.
Like, the chapel is the fuggliest set I've ever seen in my life. Europe's full of churches. Could you not hire one for like an afternoon, a real one? It's also very carefully denominationless. Like, you can't tell what version of Christianity this is. They're it's non-specific. And Amber wears like a hideous polyester Wish.com dress.
Oh, it's garbage.
It's awful. But she wears her sneakers, so you can tell she's really still her.
They very, very purposefully put in a scene of her lifting up the wedding dress to reveal her Converses.
Yeah, because she did that for the ball scene in the first movie where she showed off her Converses. So she's like, I still did it at my wedding because this is now my wedding and I get to choose what I want. And I'm like, where did you get that wedding dress overnight? Well, it must have been from Wish.com because it don't fit and it don't look good.
And Zahil is just like tearing himself apart inside.
Mm-hmm. He's tearing himself apart. And okay, so the last Christmas Prince movie for now, to say plague years meant that we didn't get Christmas Prince 4 this year.
I mean, I don't know how much of an influence it had, but obviously the Christmas Prince movies have been influenced somewhat by Harry and Meghan. And 2020 was the year that they left the royal family. So I don't think they were going to do a film where King Richard and Queen Amber step down.
That would have been tricky. But I mean, Harry and Meghan have a podcast now, so maybe Richard and Amber will have a podcast. But anyway, so
they can call it the Royal Decree.
Ooh! Makers of Christmas Prince, please contact me. I would write an entire history of Aldovia for you. Please let me do this, because Christmas Prince 3 I think is the most interesting in terms of world building for the world of Aldovia.
I think when we first watched it, we spent 2 hours talking about the history.
The potential history of Aldovia.
Because it gets weird.
Yeah, so there's been a huge budget increase for this movie, which it's quite clear, they use nice cameras now. Like, everything looks properly shot and lit, which is a huge change. Like, before, everything was shot like this, like our lo-fi.
It was shot like a Hallmark TV movie.
But it's much increased. Everything looks a lot nicer. You have lots more outdoor scenes. Like, the whole front part of the first 5 minutes is like a montage of actual outdoor scenes. Because they had green screen in the first two and it looked bad. But they were at hospitals and government buildings. But anyway, they've fixed the economy. That's all been fixed. It was really easy.
And it took a year for the economy to bounce back.
It's all fine. It's all fine. And they're having a baby. Because, I think Netflix tweeted it with first comes love, second comes marriage, third comes. And I'm like, yeah, predictable. I love it.
You know what? Sometimes predictable is okay.
And I don't watch these for high art. I watch them for schmaltz, ridiculous Christmas shit, terrible plots.
It's what
I love.
Sometimes it's all right to go to a fancy restaurant and get a big steak or at least some nice bread. But sometimes you just want a Co-op branded sausage roll that's clearly been there for a few more days than it should have done. And it could be mould, it could be a burn mark. There's only one way to find out. Sometimes that's what you want.
I am entirely uninterested in the good, bad film binary. I am interested in the good, bad, enjoyable, not enjoyable axis graph way of looking at movies, and these movies aren't great.
Oh no,
but they're so much fun.
These are, considering their popularities, these are some of the worst films I have ever seen. But I love them.
Please hire me. Anyway, so we get an addition to the law of Aldovia. Let's just bring this up. So This movie is centered about their signing a treaty with their nearest ally / rival enemy, Penglia, which is right across the Black Sea in sort of the region of Armenia and Georgia.
So here's where it immediately gets interesting, because if they're over the Black Sea, that means that Aldovia has to at least take over like parts of Romania and Bulgaria, which is not. I had assumed they were slightly further northwest before.
Yeah, so they show you on a map.
They show you a map.
They show you a map of where Aldovia is, and also where Belgravia is, which is the kingdom from the Princess Switch movies, which we can do that next year. Yeah.
Okay.
So, Aldovia, sort of looking at on a map of Europe.
It's huge.
It's huge.
It's huge.
It is about as big as France, which is the biggest country in Europe.
It basically wipes out every country from the Czech Republic to like Serbia.
Yeah, because it goes from sort of the boot of Italy, opposite the boot of Italy. So it takes off the top half of Greece and it goes all the way up, I think I have it here, to the border where the top of Hungary and Romania is, which is a huge chunk of central, southern / a little bit eastern Europe.
And there's no Poland anymore, because Poland has been taken over by Belgravia, which also encompasses Belarus, which is, ooh. But that means it also takes up, like, Lithuania's in there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Lithuania, Luxembourg is in there?
No, Luxembourg is on the, like, way towards France.
Europe's too many countries.
Europe's too many countries.
But this is why we were talking about the Cold War. Because if Belgravia and...
Well, let's go way back into ancient history.
Yes.
So, let's consider Aldovia as a holdover province from the Roman Empire, because Dacia, which is what is Romania, Romania is called Romania because it's the land of the Romans. So that maybe instead of Romania, the Romans took over Proto-Aldovia, which was that region, and it sort of became a specific country and sort of grew over time. We know Aldovia is 700 years ago, so maybe it was a series of smaller states, sort of like the German states were for the Holy Roman Empire, that became solidified into one nation, which appears to be a nation for Slavic people, kind of what Yugoslavia was meant to be.
Before it no longer existed.
So you get, this is, what we would consider a nation of Slavic peoples, but apparently the Slavic peoples don't exist in this universe.
Because everyone's got an English accent.
Everything in Aldovia is British.
Not only an English accent, but a not even generic British accent, an upper class British accent.
Yeah.
Everybody talks like this.
So I think, like, was Aldovia a Roman province that spread down over the course of the Byzantine Empire, and then when Rome fell, or Byzantine fell, Aldovia became an independent nation?
Because Aldovia being where it is and being as big as it is, it takes out the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Which is the inheritance of the Holy Roman Empire.
It's complicated.
So, because it's in the region of, it does take up a part of what would be Austria.
Some of Austria is now Aldovia. But, like, it has to have been a Roman place before, because Christianity, that's after Constantine. And can we talk about, like, World War One? Because if there's no... This encompasses Serbia, which was a huge factor in the start of World War One. If Archduke Franz Ferdinand, assumedly, does not exist in this universe, never existed.
Because no Austro-Hungarian Empire.
No Austro-Hungarian Empire, which means there's no interconnected, like, tangled web of European politics, which all gets shattered by the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who then went on to be in a middling band in the early 2000s. But if that didn't happen, if he wasn't assassinated, there was no World War One. Which means if there's no World War One, then, Germany doesn't fall into the state of disrepair, which eventually leads to World War II and the rise of fascism. And if there's no rise of fascism, there's no rise of the Soviet Union to combat that, which means that Stalin probably never got into power. Was there a Bolshevik revolution? Is Russia still a monarchy?
Imperial power?
Is it still run by a Tsar? What happened to Rasputin? What happened to Anastasia? And Belgravia taking up, like, Poland, Belarus, like, that area of it, it implies that the Soviet Union never came down to take Germany and to have East Germany and East Berlin. And oh my god!
The existence of Belgravia implies that Poland never existed as an independent nation, which means that it...
Prussia. The defenestration of Prague.
So, I guess for a start, World War One wouldn't happen because, like, Slavic nationalists wanted a country for the Slavic people. There already is one. It's Aldovia. So none of that tension's there. The Austro-Hungarian Empire didn't exist. Does that mean... Was there a reformation in this world? I need to know, because a huge part of that was like the Holy Roman Empire and its collapse and how it was linked into the promotion of Catholic thought and the diet of worms. But I guess that never happened. There was no defenestration of Prague.
Also, if there was no World War II, no rise of fascism, no rise of the Soviet Union, no just like complete and utter economic and social collapse across the entirety of Europe, why is there a European Union? Because the European Union was formed, despite what the racists will tell you, as a direct result of World War II to make sure that Europe didn't just collapse in on itself again. But if Europe never collapsed in on itself because there was no World War I, there was no World War II, they're using euros. There has to be a European Union. But there's no European Union if there's no wide collapse of Europe. Does Britain still regard Churchill as like this godly figure in this world?
Maybe
because
Churchill was never born.
Hopefully, but because there's no World War II, Churchill can't come up and be like, I'm the greatest Briton ever, despite the fact he was a massive twat. Like, but they don't address any of it. I don't think any of this was intentional.
No.
They did not put as much thought into the world history of the Christmas Prince universe
as I will,
as we have. I just want to know if Russia is still an imperialist power. Did they invade Afghanistan in the 70s in this universe?
Well, the region... if we're going to talk about Russian power, Aldovia is in the region they control the Black Sea, so presumably they have a controlling interest over Crimea, which means that the 19th century Crimean War never happened, which means that Catherine the Great never invaded the region around the Black Sea, which means that Russia was never had its age of imperial expansion. Was Aldovia the main empire of Europe? Because they are in the region of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They're as big as France. France was an imperial power. Did Aldovia colonise the world? Is it that not that they speak British, but everyone speaks Aldovian?
And considering how big it is and how important Aldovia must be to European history, there's no one in it. There's like 50 people at any given point in any of the scenes.
Did they have colonies?
Did they colonise? I'm trying to think of what the French got.
Well, the French had French Polynesia.
What's America like? Because obviously the French got Canada eventually.
Did Aldovia colonise the United States?
Is
that why everyone's so invested in Aldovian politics?
Maybe. I mean, Aldovia is... it doesn't go all the way down to the Baltic regions. Like, it doesn't quite...
It cuts off, like, the top part of Greece.
But because it's the Baltic Sea, that gives it access to the Mediterranean Sea, which gives it access to North Africa. So
Suez Canal.
Like, did they get Morocco? Did they get Egypt? I'm not quite sure what else is up there.
What's their opinion on politics in the Middle East?
Is South Africa a Dutch colony in this world?
Or an Aldovian colony?
Which part of Asia did they get to? Because there was that interesting story I was telling you, and I can't exactly remember what country it was. I'm pretty sure it was Thailand, where there was English and French colony on either side, and the way that the Thailand king stopped them from invading Thailand was by basically like playing both sides against each other, so that neither of them wanted to invade.
Yeah.
Was this like Aldovia and Belgravia like fighting each other?
Well, because apparently Aldovia's biggest sort of rival or ally is Penglia, which is an Asiatic nation in where Armenia and Georgia would be, which implies that the steppe people, sort of Mongolian Chinese steppe people, moved
southwest.
Yeah, southwest. I couldn't remember directions. So they moved, and Genghis Khan moved very to the west, more than we know or consider. But like, does that mean that their kingdom is a remnant of sort of the Great Khanate? Because they seem to be very, I'd say more Chinese inspired, because they wear jade jewelry. So I'm like, and their advisor is, I think, a British-Chinese actress. So does that mean that Penglia had a great sort of... Because if Penglia is a sort of a Chinese-Mongolian steppe country, sort of a previously nomadic horse peoples of the Khanate, they presumably would be really influential and important for the Silk Road, which means that Aldovia, who've had a trade agreement with them for 600 years, would benefit and flourish from the proceeds of the Silk Road being brought into Europe.
So if Aldovia is like the Austro-Hungarian Empire of this world, would it make sense if Penglia is their biggest enemy and rival? What if Penglia was the Khans, the Mongolians of this world? What if they didn't go southwest? They went northwest instead. Like, is China and sort of like that, the whole like Eastern Asian area,
as we would know it now,
is that all previous places that Penglia conquered?
Ooh, that's interesting.
And the reason they never went into Europe is because of Aldovia. Because they were at war, but it's very much implied that they were like at a stalemate, which is why the war eventually ended.
Means that the Ottoman Empire never happened, because Aldovia is in that place. So because they control the Black Sea, and also Penglia is a Christian country because they celebrate
Christmas
as well. So do they have Aldovian brand Christianity, which appears to be neither Catholic, Protestant, or Orthodox?
It's Aldovian.
Does that mean that Aldovia is sort of the guiding force of Christianity historically?
Was there no cataclysm within the Catholic Church? Was there no great split?
It's Aldovian Christianity, which is all about Christmas!
It's the most capitalist Christianity there is.
This just raises too many questions.
Like they did not put this much thought into Aldovian history, but they have presented a lot of questions that I don't think they intended people to ask.
I think the moment I saw that map of Aldovia, because I tweeted about it and it ended up with a BuzzFeed article, was that the size of Aldovia, provided that the rest of history happened as it did up until 1939, or the early 1930s, Aldovia's size means that it would be one of the dominant forces in Europe. It's also in the region that Germany wanted to expand into under the policies of the Nazi Party. So that means that they would either have to invade Aldovia or form a peace treaty and a working relationship with them. And I just want to know, was Aldovia for or against Nazi Germany?
A funnier history to think about, if fascism still rose in Germany and Hitler was still in power, like in this alternate universe, was Aldovia neutral?
Was Aldovia a neutral power? Because they kind of have they would have a deciding voice over what actions Germany could take.
Not only in terms of like economic prowess, but in terms of location, because they are the entire Baltic region.
Yeah, the region that Germany wanted to expand into is Belgravia and Aldovia, and if those countries are allied and very powerful, as presumably Aldovia is, because it's been in that shape in that region for 700 years, and I'm like, okay, what happened then? That just means that World War II probably never happened in this world. Did Italy invade Ethiopia?
I can still believe Mussolini rising up, except I can't, because that was a direct consequence of World War One and like the economic collapse of Italy. So if there was no World War One, then he wouldn't have a reason. Like, nationalism comes from people blaming the wrong people for their own country's problems, but in this world, it's different problems. You cannot have the same worldwide problems.
Did the Great Depression happen? Because that happened because of the stock market crash, but presumably Aldovia, as a stable, long-lasting nation as it is, would have had significant influence on the stock market.
I'm so tired.
Right, shall we move on?
Shall we continue talking about the film and not alternate universe European politics?
Okay. So Penglia, they come over every 100 years to sign a treaty between the two countries to ensure their peace and like prosperity and stuff. So the Penglians come to Aldovia because they switch it every 100 years. And if they don't sign it by midnight on Christmas Eve, then there's a curse that affects the firstborn child of the royal couple, of the king and queen, which means, because Amber's like about to pop because she's pregnant.
She's like 12 months pregnant at this point.
Her due date is my birthday, so she's about to pop. So, like, they gotta get this signed, or there'll be a curse. Only someone steals the treaty and activates the curse, and I'm like, yes.
There is some semblance of reality in movies 1 and 2. It's just like, you know, Hallmark romance movie, generic plot. Then there's a curse, baby.
Well, it feels like a nice, I guess, like a folkloric addition, that there's this folklore around the treaty, which sort of makes it like, what I like about this movie is that you're learning more about Aldovia as a specific nation, which I like.
The curse is specifically the curse is specifically done by a sorceress.
Yeah.
Which means, which basically you can say a witch. So I'm assuming that the witch trials and like the witch hunting thing was still.
Well, if there's no Reformation, then it wouldn't have led to the witch trials, because that was a direct consequence of instability caused by the Reformation.
Then why did a witch put a curse on them?
Witches existed before the Reformation.
Okay. The further back in Europe we go, the less I know about his politics and history.
Well, anyway, so the treaty's stolen, and it's bad, but they won't tell Amber about the curse because it's a romance movie. No one's going to tell her shit. And then the Penglians get snowed in, so they're stuck in the palace, and no one can leave the palace, and it's all very frustrating. And you get lots of nice, I suppose, coupley bits with Richard and Amber about like prepping for the baby to come, which is nice because they barely interacted at all in the second movie and were very hostile.
There's a very charming scene where King Richard and the King of Penglia are trying to build a crib together, and they get one of the faces the wrong way around, and it collapses. And that's just kind of
there's nice stuff. Like, the Penglians and the Aldovians are like a bit suspicious of each other, but there's lots of moments that have like, hey, you know, we're bonding with each other because Amber's a new queen, and she's a bit like overawed by the Penglian queen, who's very sort of like gracious and elegant and knows what to do, and that stuff is nice. That I like that. But anyway, Simon lives in the palace now, but Amber doesn't trust him. He didn't redeem himself enough.
I mean, I was going to say, to be fair, he tried to overthrow the monarchy, but actually,
legally he was right.
He was in the correct in the first film. So really, you shouldn't trust Richard.
Her best female friend is with Simon, and she's upset that everyone's pairing up because this is a romance movie and all the spares get paired up, and she's like, Simon must be doing something. Simon is plotting with the advisor to the King and Queen of Penglia to do some sort of nefarious stuff. I bet they stole the treaty, and they're trying to do all these things to find the treaty. And then Emily and Helena go down to the dungeon, because they've been talking about the dungeons a lot over the first two movies. And
in the first movie, they outright say they don't have a dungeon, and in the second movie,
like,
they retcon it so we have a dungeon.
We have a total dungeon. And then Helena and Emily have to go down into the dungeons to find where the treaty is. But there's a ghost in the dungeons because the butler told them so. And while they're in the dungeons, everything goes wrong because Amber starts to go into labour, and the doctor's not there. She gets stuck in the snowstorm.
But really badly. Like, it's implied that she kind of veered off the road and crashed into a snowbank. But what it looks like is that she parked her car and then shoveled a bunch of snow on top.
But anyway, so Richard, because remember, he rides horses. He rides out to get the doctor. She's very romantic. Helena and Emily are trying to, like, escape the dungeon with the use of a crutch and a hairpin. And then everyone else is trying to help Amber out. And, like, the Queen of Penglia is like, right, I need all these really specific items. And
because she volunteered at a hospital in Penglia for a long time. So she assumedly was a midwife.
Yeah, and she knows how, she's like, I've got this. I need, like, a heat pad and a roller and, like, a stress ball. And everyone's like, I have a paint roller. I have a heat mat. And Simon's like, I have a rubber duck to squeeze. And Gimli's like, and my axe!
I will deliver the baby in Aldovia, though I do not know the way.
And my axe! So it's like that scene. Everyone's helping out and contributing for Amber's labour, which is nice. And then Emily and Helena find the treaty.
It's like
in a tomb.
In a tomb.
And they're like, who would have stolen this? And so Amber's like, I can't work it out. I'm pushing a baby out. Ah, my journalism powers. Blogging is my life.
Blogging is my life.
So she has the baby. It's a little girl. The Queen of Penglia helps her. And they have a nice moment where the Queen of Penglia takes off her necklace and she's like, this is a charm for motherhood and I'm passing it on to you.
This is also cursed.
And that's nice. There's nice character moments in this film.
Yeah, I mean, now that they've got married, they've established, I'm not getting back into it. They've got married, but you know who all these characters are. So now in this film, they actually have time to interact with each other and utterly destroy the European history, which I'm not getting into again.
Like, they have time to just do like really fun stuff. So Amber has the baby. It's a little girl, and it's great.
Name.
Ellery with an I.
White people.
But then she's like, right, I've had a baby, but the journalist in me demands I must solve this mystery. So she gathers everyone in the room, and it's like a Hercule Poirot moment where she's like detailing all like the clues and the evidence, and she's like, Jack Hughes, Mr. Male Butler, you did it. What? And everyone's like, why did you do this? Why did you curse the baby?
Because of an ancient blood feud.
And he looks at them and goes, I had no choice. I am bound by
A blood feud.
I am bound by a blood oath. Because the signing of the original treaty like involved his ancestor being executed and then Richard's the Charlton family, the royal family getting in charge.
His ancestors family name was Devon, and they kept that family name all the way up until him, where his mother's maiden name was Devon, which means that like
he's a little, and then Amber's like, look at this book of genealogy, and it was like the two family trees. And he's like, I was bound by a blood oath. I had to try and stop the treaty.
But like 600 years and the Devon name was still there. Like we don't even have that in Britain.
Yes, we do.
Windsor is not like...
Not the Windsors, no, but other families, the Howard family.
But it's less likely for like... It's the fact that the Devon name lasted that long.
What
up
about the
until
Grimaldis? What about the Bourbons?
Don't worry about
What
it.
about the Habsburgs? They still exist.
My point stands.
But anyway, so they arrest him and they send him to prison for trying to disrupt the treaty. And then they announce that the baby's been born. They put a big sign outside the palace, which is what they do at Buckingham Palace when a royal baby's born. And then Amber's like, I don't trust you still, Simon. You were involved. And he's like, actually, me and Lynn were organising an economic deal between Penglia and Aldovia so that we can both sort of flourish in economic success, and also that movement of maternal stuff. You wanted to promote the position of women in Aldovia and Penglia. We're doing that too. And then Amber's like, oh.
Whoops.
And then Simon proposes to her friend. Yay!
Yay! Just to steal the thunder from having a baby.
I was
like the drama queen he is.
I was bound by a blood oath.
Bound by a blood oath.
He's so serious.
And he waited all this time. Because he's been the butler since the first film.
He was the one who let Amber into the palace.
How they sign this treaty every how many years?
100 years.
Every 100 years. Okay, but still,
it was kept in Aldovia the past 100 years.
Why didn't he just destroy the treaty?
Well, his family have tried before, because over the course of the movie, it's revealed that last time it was kept in Aldovia, they also stole it again. And I'm like, you got it's the lack of security that this palace, which clearly means that there's been no revolutions in this Europe. Because all these monarchies operate on the level that they suspect no one will ever hurt them, and I'm like...
That's it, because the Soviet Union was not kind to monarchies, which
neither
is more
was
proof...
the French Revolution, or the revolutions of 1848.
Which is just more proof that the Soviet Union never happened, because if it had happened, they would have had to have taken Aldovia and gotten rid of the monarchy. Although Romania was taken by the Soviet Union, and they do still have a monarchy, but that's complicated.
Their monarchy lived in exile for a while, and then they came back after the fall of...
The Romanians chose to bring them back. They were like,
yeah.
Come on back.
Because they're not officially part of government, but they're sort of ceremonially part of...
We're getting back into ultimate European history.
Yeah, so those are the Christmas Prince movies and sort of our thoughts, the plots, and how much I would love to be hired to write the official history of Aldovia, because please, I want the defenestration of Aldovia to happen. I want bishops thrown out of windows. That's all I ask. I am a simple woman. I want bishops thrown out of windows. Oh, I might use that event as well, when that Dutch minister was dragged out of his house and ripped apart and eaten by a crowd.
I love these movies.
I love these movies. So,
Blood Oath.
I was bound by a solemn blood oath. We hope that you had a safe 2020. It's been very hard for everyone, we know, but hopefully this will make you laugh for the last part, and
I thought you were going to say this will make you laugh for the last time.
And that in 2021 your firstborn child will not be carried away by an ancient sorceress's curse or be killed by a butler with a blood oath.
Hopefully any blood oaths you do have get resolved.
Throw a bishop out a window.
Merry non-denominational Christmas.
Merry holidays. Happy New Year for those who use the revised Gregorian calendar.
Which assumedly Aldovia does use, because their Christmas and New Year's happen within the week of each other.
They're not all... They are the national Aldovian church. They're not Orthodox. And I'm like, where's the Orthodox church?
If they make a Christmas Prince 4, I want more about...
More curses.
More about Aldovia's history and how it's affected the world.
More curses.
Oh, more curses as well. Yeah. It's got to be 2. One for me and one for you.